Katie is looking for every chance to have a fight with me. Her arguing is more intense, Jackie explained. My guess is that the incident with the quilts, as well as our last session, really bother her, Alison said. She cried and let you support her. She also felt her self-hatred. Now she might be looking to tell you that she is bad and that she doesn't want your support. Besides, she believes that you don't really want to give it anyway. She wants to wear you down. Welcome back again, Building the Bonds of Attachment by Daniel Hughes, wonderful book. I think the above extract kind of recaps everything last time, the quilt incidents. Katie finally pushing Jackie to a point where she sort of snaps and it causing a bit of a rupture and having to sort of repair that, where in therapy Katie cried for the first time and Jackie was able to give her some comfort. Katie has discovered a little glimpse of another world beyond the one she knew of Sally and Mike, let's say, like standing on the precipice of any new world or environment or way of thinking. It's frightening. What if Jackie does care for me? What if I'm not bad? What if I can open up to people? These are all thoughts she's now only just vaguely considering for the first time, and that is scary. You don't want to dare trusting that idea if Jackie's going to turn around in the future and go, nope, you are bad, I was lying, it was a trick, kind of thing. And in many ways, that could be seen as a step backwards, but as Alison points out to Jackie, we'll understand her need to do this. So in that sense, it's not a surprise Katie is more intensely trying to prove her badness, because there's a little part of her that's just opening up to the idea of goodness. And rather than fight back or argue or stop her trying to resist this goodness, you accept and understand her resistance. You don't force her to change your way of thinking. I don't even know if you can do that to begin with, but you just accept it's very difficult for her, whilst in your very being, I guess, continuing to show her love. If Katie will change, it will be based on parental love for her, enjoyment of her, commitment to continue to reach out to her when she is covered with shame. There's a wonderful little bit where, after the last episode's pretty profound therapy session, Stephen, who is the caseworker for Katie, you may have forgotten that, I haven't mentioned him in ages. Stephen comes to the house expecting to see Katie behaving much better after this wonderful, miraculous therapy session, and he's pretty disappointed to get there and see Katie and Jackie kneeling at the bottom of a staircase with a bucket of soapy water and sponges, washing pee off of the steps. Again, you may note, I think I said it last time, peeing down the staircase from the very top of it. This is her not just expelling waste in a symbolic sense, a projection, probably a feeling of power when she is at the very top peeing downwards. I think that's in there, but assuming I mentioned it in the first episode, I may not have done actually, because I wanted to keep things fairly safe when talking about the abuse she suffered. I didn't want to overwhelm anybody, but it is worth pointing out there was an incident where Katie's biological dad, Mike, peed on her while she lay hurt on the floor. I think, particularly with that in mind, it's not a surprise to see her keep peeing on things. Perhaps, if nothing else, there is a very, very small part of her trying to understand that experience from her past. It must have been quite the waterfall, Jackie said with a dry sense of humour. Stephen was frustrated. Would Katie ever change? Why would she do that? Stephen, she has a long way to go, Jackie said calmly. I knew what I was in for. She can't take giant steps. Yesterday's session was important, but I imagine only a small part of it will stick. She needs many experiences like that. I am hoping that washing down the steps with me after peeing on them will be another experience that will also help the process. I assume she's telling Stephen this out of Katie's earshot. But again, this is very true. I made this point before the time Katie scratched the car, if you remember that, so this might be repetitive a little bit now, but I do think it is important to emphasise this again. Washing the steps with Katie is not meant to be a punishment. You're not making her do something that she doesn't want to do in order to teach her consequences, because you're not trying to shame her. Katie is looking for shame right now. She's looking for that proof that she's bad, and for Jackie to be angry at her. In a weird way, that's kind of what she wants, but what she needs is love and acceptance. The point of washing the steps is instead a reparative experience, a positive, healing experience of her getting to fix the bad thing she did, teaching her in a very direct way when things go wrong, they can be resolved, you can repair situations. She's literally doing that right now. Katie you have that power, which is the complete opposite to her current way of thinking, which is when something goes wrong, it proves she's bad and she has to double down and lean further into the badness. And B, the experience of doing this with Jackie, a cooperative team experience. I think it would be shaming if Katie had to do it on her own. Doing it together not only makes it less shaming, but it is then literally the two of them working together to resolve the bad thing. You did something wrong, but we can still work as a team. We are still a team, you know? That's an incredibly powerful message. And actually a third point as well, a very crucial one. Jackie is showing awareness for what Katie did. You did pee on the stairs, there's no ignoring that fact. I always want to emphasise that point when people see all this kind of stuff as mollycoddling or argue that kids need to learn consequences and all that sort of talk. So it's important to be clear, at no point is Jackie ever overlooking the bad things Katie does. Ever. Even when she feels exhausted and she knows confronting Katie about the bad behaviour will set off an explosion and Jackie would just rather clean it herself and not mention anything to Katie to avoid that aggro. Even then, she goes to Katie, she tells her, that wasn't a good thing you did there, you've peed down the staircase, that's not what we do in this home. And unfortunately, yeah, it's kind of hard to say that in a way that isn't shaming, and it does cause a reaction from Katie, you have to expect that, but what you're also saying by doing that is, I see the bad things you do, Katie. I don't love you because I'm blind to them, I am aware of all the sides of you that you feel are bad, and yet I still love you. I love all of you. How much more deeply accepting that is, for someone to see all of your faults, all of your bad behaviour, and still love you, rather than love you only when they turn a blind eye to them. If part of Katie's persistence to be bad right now is to try and prove to Jackie and to herself, I am a bad person, you'll stop loving me when you see that, then Jackie does need to acknowledge, yes, I do see the bad behaviour, I know you peed on the stairs, I recognise that, Katie, but I still care for you, and we can fix this. We can go and wash the stairs together. I think we see more of this sort of thing in next therapy session, as well as quite a lot of other big things, so we're just going to jump into that now briefly before coming to the stuff that follows afterwards. Stuff I think you'll find quite interesting. Well, Katie kiddo, you look kind of perky today, Alison said as Katie sat between her and Jackie on the couch. Your hair looks extra curly, your nose looks kind of bouncy, and your freckles look kind of bossy. Is that right? Katie smiled in response to Alison's smile and friendly tone of voice. My nose isn't bouncy, she laughed. Oh no? Let's see. Alison took her forefinger and lightly bopped her nose twice. Yes it is, I knew you were extra perky today. No it isn't, Katie yelled, now smiling even wider. Oh Katie, I can tell by how much you want to disagree with me that you're extra perky. No you can't. You are so great at arguing, Katie. You do it without thinking, Alison replied. No I don't, Katie laughed. You're so good at it, I'm going to give you a little hug. I've just included that first because it has been a while since I've included much of the playful stuff. Still very important, still a great way to begin a session. Obviously the work needs to go beyond just these experiences and to actually think about some of the shameful feelings and everything, but it's these interactions that remind Katie the two of them still get on very well. Before Katie enters the room, there is that routine of Jackie and Alison talking, so Jackie of course told Alison how the week had been, and that's where we get that quote earlier saying Katie is looking for every chance to have a fight with me. So they've had that discussion already, but a little way into the session, Alison says to Katie, sounds like you had some fun this week, Katie. Sounds like a lot of hard times too. She said that you were unhappy a good deal of the time. Alison maintained her accepting and curious tone while noting Katie's sudden tension. I felt sad when I heard what a hard week you were having. It seems like just about everything at home has been bothering you. Anything we can do to help? Nothing's bothering me, Katie said firmly. Masterfully worded, by the way, not you've been getting into trouble or behaving badly or whatever, but that you've had a lot of hard times. And not that Alison's angry or disappointed with her behaviour, but that she's sad to hear it's been hard for Katie. You know, even if it's what she's used to and half wants, nobody enjoys being bad and doing things wrong, and the kind of anger that explodes out of all of it. Of course it's been hard for Katie. Either way, in spite of this less shaming, more compassionate way of wording things, Katie is still slamming the shutters down and going, nope, I'm fine, nothing's wrong. A thing people typically do, I think, in counselling, and I very much doubt any counsellor hasn't come up against this kind of thing and had that very difficult task of how to get around it. You don't want to get caught up in some odd tug-of-war scenario where you're, rationally giving evidence to undermine their stance and saying, well, no, you say you're fine, but there's this and this and this, all of that kind of stuff, because that could end up quite confrontational. Your focus has to remain on the feelings, I think. Note how Alison's next response isn't to say, yeah, well, you say that, but Jackie's just told me how bad you've been and there was this that happened or whatever. Instead, she says, I wish that you were, honey, but when you need to be near your mum a lot, I think you must feel kind of grumpy. I don't need to be near her. I don't need a mum, Katie replied. Just as her earlier playful and friendly manner had to be total, now she was completely annoyed without any sign she had been laughing 1 minute earlier. But you're still a girl, Katie, and it's good to have a mum to take care of you. I don't need a mum. I can take care of myself. Oh, Katie, you have learned how to take care of yourself. You've had to be tough and strong and not need anyone. If you're a little girl and you need a mum to take care of you and she doesn't do it very well, you need to take care of yourself. To be strong. So strong. If no one else is taking good care of you when you're little. Nobody did. Jackie doesn't. She just pretends to take care of me in front of you. She doesn't care about me, she just gets paid to have me live with her. Which, just to interject for a moment, is a phenomenal thing for Katie to say. Remember when I talked in whatever previous episode about the upstairs, downstairs brain and forming connections? Look how her brain is growing. She is able to express and effectively communicate quite a complex feeling here. Originally she'd just say that you're mean or that I hate you or something like that. Then we started to see her go a bit deeper, understand her own feelings on another level to be able to consciously express you don't like me. Now she's able to communicate the feeling that Jackie just pretends to take care of me in front of you. She doesn't care about me, she gets paid to have me live with her. Really, that's quite an astonishingly profound feeling for a little girl to suddenly come out with. But kids often do come up with surprisingly profound things when you give them a chance and a space and help them to, get better at making these connections in their brains and to being able to communicate these things and recognise them themselves. This in itself is a huge development for Katie that will, in the long term and in a more underlying way, make a massive difference. And in response to this, Alison doesn't argue. She doesn't say, Jackie does care for you, Katie, and then provide rational evidence to prove it, or any of that stuff people might sometimes do in this situation. What Alison does instead is empathise with how that must feel for Katie to think that about Jackie. Not force her to change her mind, but reflect on how it feels to think the way she does, whilst gently hinting that there might be another way to view things. Oh, Katie, Alison said with some distress for her. You think that all you mean to Jackie is she's getting money to raise you? No wonder you don't let yourself need her. No wonder you say that you don't care for her, because it seems that she doesn't care for you. And look how gently I think Alison adds another layer of thought to Katie's expression there. First it was just Jackie doesn't care for me, she's paid to. Now it's Katie doesn't care for Jackie because she feels Jackie doesn't care for her. Another extra layer to the feelings, I guess. Bringing awareness to that sort of thing is exactly what will strengthen the brain's ability to form these connections. What does Jackie say when you tell her that? Alison asked. Katie looked away. Katie, is it okay if I tell her for you? I'd like to know what she will say. Katie nodded. In her way of speaking for Katie that we've seen her do before, Alison expresses this feeling to Jackie and again then adds the extra layer which Katie might not be ready to think through really, but Alison will judge that best. It's too hard to let myself believe that you want to take care of me. If I did believe that you cared for me, it would only hurt more when you stopped pretending to care and then make me leave, like everyone else did. Jackie replied with sadness in her voice. It would be hard, so hard, Katie, to believe a mum cares about you and then discover that she doesn't. No wonder you've learned how to be strong and not want me to take care of you. It is hard, Jackie. It's easier when you get mad at me. Alison spoke for Katie. Ah, Katie. Now I understand better why you do get mad at me sometimes. If I get mad at you, then it will remind you to stay strong and not need me at all. I understand what you're saying, my strong little girl. I'm not little, and I can take care of myself. Alison continued, talking for Katie. I'm glad you're strong, Katie, and I wish that sometimes you thought that you could trust someone to take care of you a bit, to give yourself a break from all the hard work. I can't trust anyone like that. I know, Katie. I hope someday you can trust me like that. Alison, now almost speaking in a whisper, I hope so too. I'll just say 2 quick things about that moving exchange. When in the past I've talked about how you can't just tell someone their problems or whatever stigma in the way I've criticised Dr. Phil for doing on his show, you can't just intellectually tell Katie you're trying to make Jackie mad because if she gets mad at you it'd prove she doesn't care about you at all, just like you fear, because what the hell would that achieve, you know? You want to move the heart and to strengthen their own ability to think about their feelings for themselves. How much more impactful this exchange is for Katie than just explaining her behaviour would be. Not just because of how Alison and Katie did it either, but how it came directly out of Katie actually expressing this exact point. You know, Katie is ready to at least partly reflect on this stuff because she communicated it in the first place. The second thing to say is note how Alison didn't bend. Speaking as Katie, she didn't kind of go, oh, that makes sense now, Jackie, I feel much better and think differently, sort of thing. She stuck to what Katie feels and said, I'm not little and I can take care of myself. You know, Alison doesn't need to craft some happy ending here like a children's TV show. If Katie's not ready to change her perspective, then that's fine, you don't need to force it. There is a ton more great stuff in this session that I would love to read through right now. One thing is Alison drawing a picture of Katie of the heart behind a wall and talking through the protection that wall offers, but also adding, the problem with your plan to use a wall to keep your heart safe is that the wall also keeps out love. There's also a conversation with Alison speaking for Katie again where she says, Sally didn't take care of me very well. I don't know why she didn't. I used to think it was my fault, but now I'm not sure. I thought that I was a bad baby. Now I'm not sure. I want to think that I was a good baby, but I'm not sure. Katie ends up crying again and receives comfort, but none of that is what I want to focus on right now because I think it would kind of repeat over stuff we discussed last time. I will, however, write out part of that exchange and post it on Patreon, which is something I've just realised I can do with this series. Add some extra bits of text to an article on Patreon. Right now, we're going to go back to the home life and to Jackie's diary. Jackie informed Katie that her recent behaviours indicated that she needed to spend more time with Jackie. She also told her that they would both be fairly busy, but that it wouldn't be too hard because Jackie would always be at her side. I suppose I'm just aware there's a lot of home life stuff that I've never given concrete examples for. I've done little bits when big stuff happens, but what about just the general home life with Jackie? How is Jackie? How is Katie? What's going on? I think I've been waiting for a certain chapter in the book where we see entries in Jackie's diary, because it's all a fascinating insight. Although before the diary, actually, here's just a few small extracts from the chapter. Once, Katie was especially angry, and instead of slamming her door as she usually did, she slammed it 3 times. Jackie came to her room and insisted that if Katie was going to slam her door more than once, she needed to slam it 5 times, and indicated that Katie owed her 2 more slams. Jackie left, and shortly afterwards heard 3 slams. She was sure to return and thank Katie for the extra one. Another time, Katie put water in Jackie's rubber boot. Later that day, Katie was colouring and looked up to see Jackie holding her boot and watering the plant with the water inside, filling it up again, then watering more plants. She never mentioned it to Katie. When Jackie responded this way, she was careful to do it with a twinkle in her eye and not with ridicule or sarcasm. I mean, that's playful parenting at its best, right? Obviously, bigger, more serious stuff this might not be appropriate for, but for things like this, it is acknowledging the behaviour, which is enough, I think, here. As I said, Jackie never overlooks any of it. She always lets Katie know she has spotted the bad behaviour, even if that's all she does. Jackie doesn't really need to point anything out in these situations. She just accepts Katie's anger and shows her that she can have a bit of fun and humour with it. In some certain situations, you can even see it as a slight kind of positive, I think, and mischievousness. There is a very thin line there, admittedly. A lot of people look on mischievous qualities as a bad trait, but I don't think they always are. Sometimes it is something you can have some fun with. Really, this is just two people having chemistry, though, and forming some level of a bond the way any human people need to do. It's kind of like that classic cop duo of the grumpy one, Katie, who doesn't want to get along with their cheery sidekick that eventually wears them down. There's then a description of a typical day they have together and the sort of activities they do, which, as I have said in the past, are a great variety of different types of activities, never too much of one kind at a time. At breakfast, Katie found the food that Jackie had chosen for her to eat. After breakfast, Jackie went with her and chatted about the day as Katie brushed her teeth and washed her face. Jackie continued to talk with Katie as they waited for the school bus. When Katie returned from school, Jackie was waiting at the door with a greeting and with milk and crackers. Playtime often involved some time on a swing or a bike, with Jackie admiring Katie's abilities. When Jackie began to prepare dinner, Katie sat at the kitchen table and listened to some music while drawing and colouring. At times, Jackie would ask her to do something to help with dinner. Often Katie set the table. After dinner, Mark would supervise Katie, often with activities just the two of them did, for an hour or so while Jackie took a break and the teenagers managed the dishes. As I've said, I think numerous times before, routine. For any children or people struggling with trauma, routine is the best thing, I think. Because when there's a bit of your brain that's stuck on high alert about danger around the corner, it obviously helps phenomenally to know what you're doing that day and when, and to not have so many surprises. Similarly, not giving Katie too many choices yet. Obviously, she'll need to strengthen her ability to make choices without being too overwhelmed, but you walk before you run there, you know? The key thing I want to touch on, the key part of the routine is mum time, as it's called in the book. It's basically special time Jackie and Katie spends together, just the two of them, right before Katie goes to bed, and they seem to spend it in her bedroom. Jackie might give Katie a back rub, shampoo her hair, play with the baby dolls with her, tell stories, read, sing, show her how to play the recorder. When Katie was in a complaining mood, Jackie would refuse to be rejected. In those times, she might read out loud, listen to music, or sit and rock while watching Katie. If Katie did not want to engage with her, Jackie would accept her wishes but not withdraw from her physically. At times, Katie was receptive to Jackie, rocking her during their time together. On a few occasions, she even asked to have Jackie give her a bottle as she was being rocked. Jackie gave the bottle to her only when Katie requested it, and only when she was able to lie quietly in her arms and accept the milk or juice and the care it represented. Which, you'll notice, may sound quite babyish at times there. For one, Katie is only 6, I think, or maybe 5 still, but more so this is a child who never got these things much as a baby. And while she might be very keen to show her strength and not need people at all, she also sort of wants that care and needs that younger level of emotional development at the same time. This mum time is a very nurturing experience. Sometimes I think people can be weirded out by the idea of responding to children as though they are younger than they are, especially when it seems to be the exact reverse to me suggesting in previous episodes that it's good to treat children like they're not babies, like they are intelligent people capable of rational thought who you can explain things to. Both of those things I think can be true. If Katie never received enough of this stuff when she was a very young child, then part of her emotional development requires some of it now to catch up in a way, I guess. But yeah, if she is in a state of mind where she does want to be strong, then that's fine. Jackie doesn't force her care. She just sits there in her presence, remaining attentive and showing her there is a possibility of more care, because sometimes Katie is in a state of mind where she not only accepts it, but asks for it. And those experiences, trusting they'll be available every single night over a long time, that is going to be incredibly important to her development. Anyway, I got distracted. I was supposed to be sharing a few diary entries. There is a lot of them in the book, and I think I'll probably write some more of them up on Patreon, which will be able to find there, but here's just a few of them. I'll read them out. October 18, 1994. Turned my back for a moment and the Cheerios were all over the floor. Katie didn't know how they got there. I told her that since she was alone with them, it was her responsibility to keep them from jumping out of the box. Thus, she needed to return them all to the box. After more than enough time, many were still on the floor. I scooped some up and dropped them down her shirt. Rage followed. In fairness, I told her to drop some down my shirt. She most certainly did. I put some in her hair and she reciprocated. We shared a glass of apple juice. We raced to see who could pick up the most remaining Cheerios. She won a handful of blueberries as a prize. After school, I asked her to search for any remaining Cheerios, where she found a path of them leading to the swing. Before bedtime, I painted her face with erasable markers and she did mine. Mark got the Polaroid. She accepted snuggling at bedtime. October the 24th, 1994. After therapy this afternoon, she is more withdrawn. Focus on Mike's abuse of her seemed hard. At home, while making muffins with me, she actually asked why Sally didn't keep her safe. No eye contact. Then dropped the beans on the floor. Was able to laugh when she found 2 old Cheerios under the counter. October the 28th, 1994. My light jacket was missing. I found it in her closet, and while it was there I found some soiled and wet underwear. She did not know how they got there. She washed them twice. We removed everything from the closet to air it out. It would remain empty for a while to make it much easier to search. Some clothing and toys were stored in the attic. She screamed over my stealing her stuff. I suggested that I was protecting them from being ruined by her pee. At bedtime I sang to her and then snuggled with her and read a book. October the 29th, 1994. While I do the dishes, she sweeps the kitchen floor. When I direct her to sweep it for the 3rd time because lots of debris is still there, she shouts that it wasn't there a minute ago. I give no answer, but a minute later I start saying loudly that someone has snuck another dirty bowl into the sink. I run into the living room and yell at Diane. When I get back, I yell that another bowl has been snuck into the water. I stomp on the floor and slam the door. Katie, Diane and I have a good laugh at lunch. I complain about having a sore throat from all the yelling. I don't think there's much I need to say here that hasn't already been said in past videos. I think that last example of Jackie stomping around depends a lot on the tone with which he does it, because, as suggested earlier, that sort of thing could seem an act of ridicule if done with the wrong tone. Playfulness is a very, 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 very important thing, I think. But yeah, that's how the chapter ends. The next chapter will have quite a big event in it, so to finish, we're just going to go back a few pages in the book to something smaller in another session there was with Alison. And this is very small, but I think it's worth me adding here. Alison says, I hear that yesterday you were able to go for a walk with Diane, but it was shortened because you fell by the stream behind your house, and you got a cut and it was bleeding. Jackie saw you walking back through the fields with Diane's arm around you. Alison then added, Jackie said that when you got closer, she saw that you both had tears. I was bleeding, but she didn't get hurt and she had tears too. I wonder what that was about. I wonder why Diane had tears too. I don't know. Katie gave a little laugh. We can tell why Diane was crying. Diane is one of Jackie's other children, by the way, in case you've forgotten. It's a little thing called empathy. However, Katie is confused about it because why would anyone ever care enough about her to cry? The interesting thing, of course, is that there has probably been other circumstances in the past where Katie has seen someone cry for her, and she probably failed to take any note of those circumstances, but here, she was thinking about this situation. She's noticing it herself and trying to make sense of these things a bit now. Why would Diane have tears? As I've always said, you need the clients in counselling to be able to start thinking for themselves and doing that kind of processing of their feelings. This is a big example of that. Alison talks with excitement about the fact Katie and Diane were both crying. Katie, I think it means that you're becoming safe enough to be sad. And they talk a little bit before coming back round to why Diane had tears, where Alison says, Your tears were saying, I want you to take care of me. Her tears were saying, I want to take care of you. When someone you care for has tears, you have tears too. Caring tears. Diane's tears helped your tears to get smaller. This has been a particularly long video where I usually try to keep them to about 20 minutes, but I assume nobody's going to hold it against me here. As I say, next episode will be quite a big one in terms of drama, possibly in terms of length too. It's hard to say until I actually record it, but I'm very much looking forward to that one. If you got something from this though, please give it a like, please give me a comment either way. If you want to, you can subscribe, support me on Patreon, where I will post more extracts from the therapy session and maybe more of Jackie's diary. Otherwise, just hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Janice McMahon, Luke Hoare, Chichu Kaber, Michael Gallagher, InSquares, Dustin Paulson, Samara Salsi, Sharikoff14, Joshua C. Follier and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.